At what age did you find out that you were born thanks to IVF?
My mom just told me, this is how it is, daughter. You were born by such and such a method.
Many people believe that all children born through IVF are infertile.
My pregnancy was managed naturally.
Would you recommend turning to a surrogate mother or not? Good evening, everyone. We are starting a series of podcasts where we will speak honestly and without embellishment. We will talk about IVF, surrogacy, and how modern technology and medicine are overcoming infertility, giving hope in the most difficult and seemingly hopeless situations. We will speak openly about things others are even afraid to ask about. And today we have as our guest Alesya Lee, one of the first IVF children born in Kazakhstan, who has now become a mother herself, but naturally. Welcome, Alesya.
Hello.
Let's go back perhaps to the 1990s, to the situation surrounding IVF, as they say, with a sense of unease. Everyone is afraid to talk about this topic, even to ask. And I want to ask, did your parents hide the fact that you were born thanks to IVF, or were they open about it? Did people talk about it? Did relatives or friends know?
At first, most likely, until I was a bit older. Of course, they didn't talk about it. They knew about this program and that I was, so to speak, created by this method. At that time, only close family and relatives knew. It wasn't public, it wasn't published anywhere or anything like that. Only a very small circle of people knew about it, including doctors and my family. Because at that time, the topic was so vast and still not fully understood, it still wasn't completely supported by concrete facts. It was probably the one and only real opportunity for many families who were courageous enough to take such a significant risk and try the experimental program. And at that specific time, the situation was not fully understood in the medical community, also because there were specific and confusing things that were communicated to my mother during the entire process, even long after my birth occurred. So it was a secret, which at that time was shrouded in, you could even say, a complicated word like cancer, yes, and people coped with it in their own way. Some people went into this program with their eyes closed, while others, probably with open hearts, went in understanding that, given the chance of not having children, it's better to try, and maybe it will work out. And so, maybe it did work out for my parents, and today, that's me.
Even now, for many couples, this is still a taboo topic. Many of my acquaintances did IVF in Kazakhstan, but no one even tells their relatives. I have a question. At what age did you find out? At what age were you? Did your parents tell you that you were born thanks to IVF?
My mom probably kept this secret her whole life.
And
for her, it was probably even a bit of a shock when I started talking about it so openly, most likely after I had my own child. But at that moment, the moment when my mom told me about it, I never had that feeling of, oh my God, how terrifying, oh my God, how will I go on living? I never felt that way. And probably thank God for that, because when my mom told me about it, give or take, maybe I was, well, I can't say for sure, but somewhere between 10 and 15 years old, in that range. And probably after the moment, let's say after I grew up from a girl into a woman, yes. My mom just told me, this is how it is, daughter. You were born by such and such a method. I said, what is that? And she explained it to me. And I said, well, okay, that's fine, and went on with my life. So I never had any of those emotions, no shock or fear. So I was like, well, that's fine, I'm alive, everything's okay. What other questions should there be about this?
did they take you for any additional tests or examinations? Maybe more than your peers?
No, my mom wasn't that particular about it, maybe. The only moment I remember which my doctors, or rather my parent doctors, later talked about. There's a photo from when my mom, at some point, probably before I turned 10, maybe even a bit younger, brought me to the clinic, just so to speak, to meet the people who created me. To show me off, to chat, to spend some time together, and that's when they took a photo of me as a little girl. That photo is still kept at the clinic. But thankfully, there were never any rare or particularly important studies done on me in my life. It was only when I turned 18 that I started seeing my own gynecologist and was under regular observation. For her, for us in our family, this is normal. So I just went through it myself as a woman, an important checkup for myself. But it wasn't in the context of, oh no, I'm a special child and I need some kind of special examination. No, I'm an ordinary woman
Who you opened up.
Yes, who wants to be confident in her reproductive functions and simply in her women's health.
So your childhood wasn't really any different from, I don't know, your classmates' childhoods? You didn't notice anything like that, right?
No, there was nothing like that at all. And for example, when the story of my family, my childbirth, was published in the news, at that time when I gave birth to my son, I was already 22 years old. It was really funny when you start getting messages on Instagram or on your phone like, wait, it turns out you were born in such a program? I never would have thought so. And these were the very same classmates, relatives, close friends, acquaintances, even people who studied with me at university. They were like, wow, it turns out you're a special person. I said, well, I guess that's how it is.
So all your friends and people around you only found out the main thing after you gave birth, right?
Yes, because the birth happened in, let's say, a public format. And the doctors were very protective of me before I gave birth. During my pregnancy, and this was also at my personal request, nothing was published anywhere. So the news only came out when I had already given birth and I was holding my child in my arms. That's when the news went public.
Well, yes, because many people believe that all children born through IVF are infertile. And you yourself, did you ever doubt your own fertility? I don't know. Maybe were you especially sensitive about it? Did you ever have any doubts about becoming a mother, or there was nothing like that?
Personally, I never had anything like that, but I think my mom experienced some stress about it because looking back at her own life or just considering her overall, yes, her women's health, my mom did. She protected me a lot in all these matters, including always taking my women's health very seriously. Yes, so at first she would go to the gynecologist with me, help me with certain things. She was always extremely careful about all of this. And the fear probably that I might not be able to have children of my own in the future, that was more in my mother's mind. That's why she protected me, truly in everything. And I guess for that I owe her a big thank you, because later on I never had any doubts that I wouldn't be able to. I didn't even have the thought that I wouldn't be able to get pregnant myself, or in general, really. Any kind of fear about this. I didn't have any of that. I'm just an ordinary woman. I got married. I wanted a child. And everything happened for me naturally. My pregnancy was managed naturally. A standard
Pregnancy management protocol, right?
I can't even call it a protocol. It's just the standard process of pregnancy management with a gynecologist like any ordinary woman. I didn't even, let's say, have any tests done by a reproductive specialist or anything like that. Everything was as natural and as calm as possible for me. The only thing probably that we decided to keep private with the reproductive doctors was the fact that I am an IVF child and that I had a natural pregnancy. And during the pregnancy, we didn't publicize this in any way. That is, we waited until the moment when I would feel calm, when I had already given birth, and when I could be completely sure that everything was fine with me and with the baby. And only then did we make this story public. But I think the doctors were still worried. They were concerned, I think, about the process of my pregnancy itself. So that's why it was published at the end. So they can be understood as well. And they wanted me to go through the pregnancy as calmly as possible at my own pace, so to speak, so that no one would, let's say, pay too much attention to it. No one was watching me closely. No one was asking me questions. No one was inviting me anywhere so that no one would know. And I went through my pregnancy calmly. Only the people at the clinic knew. And then after I gave birth, that's when everything became public.
You gave birth yourself, right? Naturally?
Yes.
At what week did you start to realize you were pregnant? Was it right away from the first weeks as soon as you found out?
I think about a month in. So I didn't find out right away. Well,
that's almost right away. And how do you feel now in the role of a mom?
But my son it is most likely my little island of joy, because through the profound experience of motherhood, I went through a kind of feminine, probably emotional maturation, when you truly begin to realize that you have a precious life for which you are completely and utterly responsible. My son I'm even starting to tear up a little. He is my happiness, my joy, and many of the things I'm going through right now. I'm experiencing thanks to him. He gives me all these wonderful aspects of motherhood, and I truly feel with him that a piece of my heart really is with him. And, well, it is simply impossible to describe. These definitely aren't tears of sadness. They are truly and deeply tears of pure joy, because every single day spent with him feels just like a grand celebration. Honestly, with him by my side, it is always some brand new, absolutely amazing and wonderful adventure. And he has probably taught me how to love, how to look at life in a completely different way, and to appreciate the simple moments.
So, Alesya, you became a mother, and now you probably understand even more how much your mom was looking forward to having you. And as they say, she did everything she could. She did everything possible for this, even, as they say, back in the early 1990s, when everything was just starting with faith and hope. But somehow, somewhere, she found this information, and thanks to that, you were born.
This is such a touching story, probably about my mom and her attempts, because now, for example, it seems very strange to me. You hear women who get upset after their first unsuccessful attempt, and they take it so tragically. But if you remember the heroic journey my mom went through in the 1990s, when there wasn't such medical accessibility, even just for basic medications, there was no confidence in the protocol process, no certainty in the IVF procedure itself, because it was just the very beginning. And for the most part, it was all based on faith. And my mom, she wanted to have several children. But as it turned out, in the end, I was the only one. And in this process, I was her second attempt. And unfortunately, the first attempt was unsuccessful. That is, she didn't get pregnant.
Did they transfer one embryo or two, or do you not know?
Those details. As far as I remember, it was one at a time. One embryo at a time, and the first attempt was made after, if I'm not mistaken, 3 years of waiting, 3 years of trying. The first attempt was unsuccessful, and the moment when it happened, and the doctors said, let's go for a second attempt. Let's try right away so you don't have to wait and worry anymore. So let's do this attempt. And it was one of 3 at that moment. It turns out in 1996 they tried to carry out, let's say, a successful protocol. But as the doctors shared at that time, she was one of 3 whom they thought, well, most likely it wouldn't be her. Yes, there was a lot of doubt about her. And
why did they think that?
There were certain personal factors related to her reproductive function, so to speak, and out of the 3, she was considered less likely, especially after the first unsuccessful attempt. And they thought that, well, most likely she wouldn't get pregnant, but it was worth trying anyway, so to speak. And fate turned out in such a way that she was the one who actually got pregnant among all 3 women who were trying. And this was her second attempt, like, let's give it a try. Today, here I am sitting in front of you, in front of everyone, and thank God I already have my own child. And we weren't, perhaps, financially prepared enough to go through all of this. But the desire, for example, of my family, especially my father, he supported her. At that moment, he gave her support. He said, come on, let's try a second time. Let's give it a shot. In other words, he supported her. And there were children after me, in the sense that there were attempts after me, which unfortunately also were not successful. My mom also had a difficult case. That is, she lost a 6-month-old baby, unfortunately, who was born prematurely. And unfortunately, possibly due to the negligence of the doctors at that time, he did not survive. And this is also a very difficult story for my mom, a story. And knowing this whole process of her life and how she later had to come to terms with the fact that I am her only child, even though she wanted more children. And as a result, she was always caring with me, always worried about me. And, well, I can say that she is the kind of person who wants to achieve her goal. Yes, a woman who was confident, a woman who truly wanted children, a woman who didn't pay attention to all those difficulties, didn't pay attention to all those statistics, all those speculations, and so on.
Yes, indeed.
She's like that. I want it. There are both positive and negative sides, but I tend to focus more on the positive side. Yes, that is, I want to focus on the positive things that are happening to me, but I can also talk about the negative experiences, yes. That is, if we talk about the fact that even now and for the rest of my life and for all my future children, in any case, I will remain that very experiment that reproductive doctors are observing. Because the specific manner in which I choose to live my daily life, and let's say the level of professional success I achieve in my life, will have a significant influence on many, for example, on future legal cases and scenarios. And when you are, so to speak, the original source of that very process, which at the time was considered possible, or even many doctors, perhaps this is justified to some extent from a medical perspective, were convinced that future children would not be able to have. There are both positive and negative sides, but I tend to focus more on the positive side, yes. That is, I want to focus on the positive things that are happening to me. But I can also talk about the negative experiences, yes. That is, if we talk about the fact that, for the rest of my life and for all my future children, I will always be that experiment that reproductive doctors are observing. Because the specific manner in which I choose to live my daily life, and let's say the level of professional and personal success I achieve in my life, will have a profound impact on a wide variety of, for example, future legal cases. And when you are, so to speak, the original source of that very process, which at the time was considered possible, or even many doctors, perhaps this was justified to some extent from a medical standpoint, were convinced that future children would not be able to have. And in a way, it's even easier for them, because if suddenly it's the other way around, they'll feel calmer, And I'm glad that in my case, it really happened not as confirmation of that myth that children can't have their own children, but rather, thank God, I gave birth myself. I went through the whole process myself, and all of it was natural. And I'm glad that I can share this, probably because I think many people would hide it. For example, there are girls who were born before me, also more or less in those years of the program, and they, for instance, don't publicize their lives at all. That is, they don't associate themselves in any way with being IVF children. In other words, they prefer a life where they're just ordinary people and don't want to be publicized in that context. And that's absolutely everyone's right. I just calmly enjoy the fact that I succeeded, because there was always a chance that, yes, I really wouldn't be able to have my own children. That would have been a completely different story, which would have gone in a different direction, yes. But considering how far everything has advanced, the level of laboratories we have now, the overall level of understanding, yes, at the embryo stage, they select only the very best in the lab. If we compare it to natural selection, where whatever happens to be fertilized is what you get, and considering that in the lab they choose only the very best, I think this is actually a very good breakthrough. So I don't even rule out the possibility that at some point in the future, people will choose between natural pregnancy and going the IVF route, for example, to select the very best embryos, the very best, so to speak, of your possible future family generations.
Some even say that children born through IVF are actually smarter, although probably this fact hasn't been proven yet, as they say. But there are a lot of studies on this now, yes. Because, as you said, we can see the embryo, and we choose which embryo is stronger, yes, which one develops faster. We have the opportunity to transfer this embryo. But here's another question. For example, if you weren't able to get pregnant naturally, would you turn to a reproductive doctor, or how do you feel about that?
I have an extremely positive attitude towards it. I even work at a clinic. That is, I'm already at the stage where I conduct trainings for women who are going through the protocol process. I am our topic coach for today. I'm someone who is always in favor of success, of trying, of positive results. I don't think that if it happened that I couldn't get pregnant, yes. Plus, taking into account the circumstances of my own birth, my risk is many times higher than, say, a woman who was born naturally herself and then later, for example, underwent IVF. In my case, the risk was truly high because I myself am, so to speak, a product of IVF reproductive technology, of IVF medicine. And in any case, I think that if the question was whether to become a mother or not, then without a doubt, I think I would calmly choose to become a mother and would go through with the program. And still, I think that would also end up being published later on.
What would you like to say today to couples who are afraid to try IVF to take that first step toward the procedure?
Here, I think I want to speak both as a specialist and as a woman. First and foremost, you need to love each other, because this is a process that isn't bound by deadlines or guarantees. Here, it's probably only supported by some higher powers, whether it will work out for you or not. And as for the deep personal desire to go through this complex medical procedure, to finally have your own biological child, and to walk this difficult path, I truly want both men and women to take this entire process very, very seriously indeed. Not from a negative perspective, but with the intention that we are a couple and we want to bring our child into the world with love. And what difference does it make how the child was conceived? Because in reality, IVF is not the whole pregnancy. It's only the moment of fertilization. That is, it's just the moment when the cells are joined. That's all. The only issue, for example, could be either a male factor or a female factor. But if both of you truly have a sincere goal to have your own baby, then I don't think there should be any negative questions about this, because the ultimate goal is to become parents and to truly be happy that you will have a baby, your own child, the miracle that you can create together. And another advantage of IVF is that you get the best embryos. It's also a major advancement in medicine. And here you just need to accept the fact that unfortunately, sometimes women or men have a factor, and there are many reasons for that. There's no one to blame in this situation. You can't say that someone is somehow at fault or not right. If such phrases exist in a couple, unfortunately, the doctor most likely won't be able to help, because there are a lot of nuances during the protocol. At the very least, certain procedures for the woman need to be done on time. And when, for example, there are some issues between a man and a woman, she might forget, she might not show up, she might treat very important steps of the protocol too lightly. And accordingly, if there isn't this communication between the doctor and the future baby's parents, then serious problems arise. That's why I want to wish that you approach this process very sincerely and that you are prepared for the possibility that it might not work out on the first try and that you may need to try 2 times or even more. And I know cases and women come to me, for example, who have undergone the IVF process. Well, that's just how things turned out in their family. Unfortunately, perhaps, yes. But in fact, maybe to their happiness, it was meant for them to have their child through the IVF process. They tried once, and then they returned to the same program about 9 years later. And they get pregnant again and give birth again. So the difference in the success rate between families may actually lie in their intention, in how ready they are to go through with this, because it really might not work out on the first try. But the chance that you'll end up without children, or that you could at least try and then succeed, is, in my opinion, much better, and it's worth just going through this process. And God willing, you'll have a child, because there are so many cases. There are cases where it works out. Pregnancy occurs even with, say, an embryo that's been frozen for many years, and a healthy child is born. There are also cases where women who are, let's say, above reproductive age go through with it and give birth. So, when you have the opportunity and a sincere desire to build a family and have your own baby, it's best to keep going, so to speak, until you succeed. And then, God willing, everything will turn out well.
But the main thing is not to give up after the first attempt. So many couples have done the first transfer. It didn't work out and that's it. Although, as they say, even when the embryos are perfect and the uterus is in ideal condition, it's always 50-50.
Yes. That is, we need to understand that just like in any other aspect of life, it's impossible to get everything you want on the very first try. Sometimes, to get what you want, you have to make an effort, and this also applies to the IVF process. Again, it's not as tragic as it's often portrayed, perhaps in the media, as it's shown in, for example, cases or stories of people who have a very negative attitude toward this. If, for instance, their first attempt didn't work out, they tend to paint everything in a very negative light. But if you understand that when you go for this attempt, you can't expect a 100% guarantee right from the first try. Yes, everything goes on, but there are factors, and there is an understanding. That is, after the first attempt, you already clearly understand where, in which process, in which exact part of the protocol, there was a lack of something. It could be absolutely anything. Everyone's case is individual. And for the second attempt, you can go in, so to speak, with 90% confidence that you will succeed. And I think that when you truly want a child, you shouldn't put so much emphasis on the first attempt. Yes, of course, it's wonderful when it works out the first time. It's undoubtedly a huge joy. It's an immediate relief. But if you realize that there are certain factors in your body that unfortunately didn't allow you to get a successful result on the first attempt, then take care of your health, take care of your condition. Yes, take care of the side factors so that the protocol itself goes more smoothly, better, and easier for you. That is, focus on more positive things and give yourself the opportunity to guarantee that very successful attempt, regardless of which number it turns out to be.
Here's a question. What is your opinion on surrogacy? For example, couples who have already had several IVF attempts, all of which were unsuccessful. Would you recommend turning to a surrogate mother or not?
There are definitely some highly successful and proven cases right here.
Uh-huh.
And there is always an option. So if you realize that, let's say, it didn't work out for you, you weren't able to do it on your own, and there are certain factors that unfortunately in your family prevent you from having a child on your own. But let's say you as a mom or dad are already ready to become parents. And I think you shouldn't get hung up on the idea that specifically that my child must be born in my own body if we're talking specifically about mothers. Because if you are ready to become a mother, then motherhood doesn't begin at the moment of conception, not when you are pregnant, but motherhood begins in your mind. And when you realize, I want to raise a child, I am ready. Yes, and your spouse supports you, and you both understand that you are ready. But unfortunately, it just so happens that you can't do this on your own, but you love each other and you want to have your own children, then surrogacy, I think, is a positive option that can help you. God willing, everything will go well in this process. And here, there are already some other specific external factors involved. But if you have a sincere desire, you are ready to become parents, and you understand that the path to surrogacy is the way, then take that step.
The main thing is not to be afraid of public opinion or what friends and acquaintances might think. If you have decided to become parents, look for every possible way and pursue it.
Yes, absolutely. Because, well, I know cases.
Yeah.
Cases from our clinic. Of course, I can't disclose names and so on, but generally speaking, surrogacy in the international format is now very, very popular. So now there are families who already have their own children naturally. Sometimes it's just one family, by the way, who also have children through IVF programs. And then after all that, they go on to request surrogacy and have children through surrogacy as well because they want a big family. And here, public opinion and so on are not even an issue at all. I actually know such an international family who turned to our IRM clinic specifically for surrogacy. And they have, so to speak, successfully grown as a family. Moreover, they went through all the stages, having children naturally through IVF programs and then also through surrogacy. So these are probably the kind of people, one of the exceptions in this world, who are truly committed to family and who, so to speak, give birth and want a big family. And that is very encouraging.
So today we can say that medicine is overcoming infertility.
Definitely, yes.
Alesya's story is the best proof that all fears exist only in our minds. And love and medicine always win. Alesya, thank you so much for your openness and honesty. You are a shining example for thousands of families not to give up. Subscribe, like, and leave your comments. If you have any questions, sign up for a consultation. This was Alla Rodriguez and Alesya Lee with you. See you in new podcasts.